Now that we've provided a little bit of context about FastFlow, I want to turn it back over to Tom so he can share some of the new features that are part of FastFlow 6.
Hi, thanks, Aaron. Sorry about jumping the gun there earlier. Just real excited to talk about this. So I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about what's in the 6.0 release. Like I said, we're real excited about it. The development team has been working around the clock for some time now, and I think you're going to like what we've come up with. So as you can see, FastFlow is a very powerful tool, but we wanted to make that power more accessible, a little bit easier to get a hold of and actually put into use. So let's talk about what we did to do that. The first thing that we did is that we've put a new user interface on top of the power of FastFlow. When you see it in just a little bit, you'll notice that it's bold and modern looking. But more importantly than the fact that it's pleasant to look at, which it is, we have been putting into place some of the best practices with respect to user experience. So some of the things that we've put in there should just make it more, easier to use, more intuitive. Things should flow for the user in just a really great way. Now, having said that, we did balance some of the things that we did. We didn't want to change the interface so much so that it would require a lot of training, retraining for anybody. But we have smoothed out a lot of the edges where things may not have seemed quite as intuitive in the past. They should be much more intuitive now. Another thing, and this is kind of related, it's part of the same thing, we will now support more browsers and devices. So we'll now support IE 9 and up. In addition to that, we are adding support for Chrome. And I expect to hear a little bit of cheering about this, but we've added iOS support. So iPads now can be used in FastFlow for workflow, for regular user workflow. So that's great. In addition to that, obviously Android tablets, since they use the Chrome browser as well. So one of the reasons why this is possible now, and this is the next item on here, is that we no longer require the use of Adobe Acrobat. So within the main workflow screen, we used to leverage actually Adobe Reader there as part of that screen, and we have removed that and written a form viewer of our own. So that allows us to have a lot more control, but it also allows us to be on iPad, since iPad does not support Adobe Reader. So that's great. One of the other things that allows is the removal of the Adobe Reader toolbar, which since it was part of that tool, didn't necessarily fit into the way that our application worked. That's gone now, so the ease of use within that screen is much better. Aaron talked a little bit about the Visual Workflow Designer. It's another thing that we're really proud of. So now creating a new workflow is much more intuitive. It is, you can see the whole thing right there, and you can drag and drop and pull things, pull new steps in, add features to those steps through just a much easier to use drag and drop type interface. Another thing, and this kind of goes along with that, is that we found that a lot of people are using user groups as part of their workflows, and we wanted to make management of those groups simpler. So we've done a couple of things. One is that now, as you're creating a new workflow or as you're editing an existing workflow, you can create new groups as in that process. So you don't have to step out of that process, go create a group, come back in and create your workflow step. You can create it as part of the workflow step. You can also add or remove multiple people in a single step from groups. So that should make group management much simpler. Another thing, and this is, we found that roles are very powerful, and a lot of our users are using roles very effectively and are integral to how they're designing their workflows. But some of our users weren't using roles, and they found that having to create a unique role for each user in the system was a little cumbersome for them for a feature that they weren't using. So we've made roles optional so that when you create a new user, if you're not using roles as part of your workflow, the roles hierarchy as part of your workflow, you no longer have to create a new role for that user. Another thing that's been simplified is routes and workflows. Previously, routes and workflows were separate. So you could create a route and then associate it with multiple workflows. We found that this was conceptually a little bit difficult, so we've combined them, and I think it makes more sense. It's really how people think about workflows anyway. So now the route and the workflow are one. It makes it easier to manage them, easier to administrate, easier to edit, easier to create. And finally, we've added a migration utility that's going to allow you to export workflows, groups and users and departments so that when you're moving from a test server to a production server, you can use the migration utility to create a single file that includes all the information of a particular workflow or set of workflows and everything that's associated with that all the way down to the users. You can move that into your production server, import it, and have all that work that you've done preserved, and decreases the chance of human error while rebuilding a workflow in a production situation that was previously created in a test situation. So those are some of the things that we've added to FastFlow. Now, while I'm talking about the 6.0 release, it's primarily a FastFlow release, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've added into Web Form Imprint, because I know a lot of people are using that and might be interested in hearing some of the things that we've added there. So just a couple of things, but they're, well, at least the first one is pretty big. So what we've done is we've added the ability to specify printer alias category, workstation ID, and location via the URL in the query string. And what this does is it gives us a lot of flexibility when integrating with other systems, so that information can all be passed in from your from whatever system you're integrating with. And it also gives a lot of flexibility around using Web Form Imprint in a virtualized environment. So just for example, in the way that the product normally works, it picks up the workstation from the DNS, from the DNS server, so that if you were in a virtualized environment, it would pick up the workstation ID of the virtual environment, when in fact you might really rather have it pick up the workstation ID of the physical workstation. And so this gives you the ability to tell the system, no, I'm not in the, I don't want you to choose the workstation ID based on the virtualized workstation, but I actually want to pick up the physical workstation ID. That's just one example of how you could use that. It's actually a very, very flexible thing that can be used in a lot of different ways. And we have a lot of ideas on how that can be used, but we're waiting to see even how some of our users may choose to use it in ways that we hadn't even anticipated yet. The other thing that we've done is we've added the ability to clear a form after it's been signed in mobile e-signature. So previously, you could do this in the desktop version of e-signature. After someone had signed a form, if you decided that it had been signed in error, or if there's something was filled out prior to the signature that wasn't correct, you could delete that signed form and start over. So we've added that ability to the mobile e-signature, and so that's it's not a huge change, but it's something that's been asked for and something that we wanted to make sure that people knew that we've included. So having said that, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Cliff and Ryan, who are going to do some actual demos of the things I just talked about.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. We'll go ahead and pass the ball over to Ryan, who will share his screen, and we'll show some of the new interface live and in person, and give you a little bit of a flavor of what Tom's been talking about and Aaron's been discussing. We'll give it 1 minute to make sure everyone can view the shared application on your side, but yeah, as he's logged in to the FastFlow interface, those of you who are familiar with FastFlow or have seen it before will notice visually there's, it's as Tom was saying, a much more attractive modern application look and feel to it, but a lot of the navigation aspects are in the same place, so it's not a huge difference from a navigation perspective for users, although a lot of things should be more intuitive. We have graphical icons to point out content and make it pop out for the user. So if we click on the Documents tab, one of the things that Ryan will be going through in a couple of minutes is a sample document and look and feel in the new interface. And really Tom was saying is we don't have an Adobe requirement now, so we can use this really on any device on the market. So iPad, which was restricted because of the Adobe requirement, now workflows can be viewed, interacted with on an iPad, just as with a PC, as we're showing here. But some of the forms that we traditionally have done for our customers make a lot of sense in the FastFlow environment, where we have internal transfers, IT access request forms, policy procedure management, purchase requests. Ryan will be going through a purchase request in a minute, but we also have entered into a realm with some of our customers who view FastFlow as a natural extension of the functionality that we've been providing for our customers for years, really over decades now, that we've been able to take form content, merge data from your registration process, but now we can go above and beyond that and interact with it in a much more robust fashion and include others in collaborating on the completion of that document in a workflow process improvement scenario. So our customers have pushed us in areas to take this into a clinical realm, where we normally would not. A lot of our partners, Meditech, McKesson, other HIS vendors in the market, Allscripts, Cerner, Epic, do a great job of clinical documentation, but as Aaron was talking about earlier, it's really often a long, arduous process to get clinical documentation fully rolled out. And this is a way of taking some of that documentation online, whether it is nursing notes, progress notes, things of a more clinical nature, and now allowing us to interact with that form more robustly online before submitting it into the document imaging system. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Ryan, who's going to walk through the purchase request process and show you a little bit of how that looks in FastFlow.
Thanks, Cliff. Good morning, everyone. As Cliff just mentioned, what I'm going to do today is give you a high-level walkthrough of our purchase request solution and show you guys how the routing and the logic in FastFlow allows someone to make a purchase request and then watch the progress as the form gets routed through their organization through management for signature and then over to accounting and purchasing to get the actual purchase made. After the demo of the solution, I'm going to go into the workflow, the Visual Workflow Designer software application to show you guys how I put together these routes and some of the criteria and logic that we use to handle the automatic routing from managers to directors to the CFO for purchasing approval, et cetera. Before I get started, what I'm going to do is pop up the form that I'm going to be using. So this is going to be the blank purchase request form that the FastFlow application is using. And this is just going to show you guys that I'm starting with a blank form surface, and this is all configurable within your organization, depending on what type of data you need to capture for your purchasing request, IP, access request, or any type of solution that you would like to use within the FastFlow application. So on this blank form right here, you'll see that there are a couple fields that we're going to automatically pre-populate when we start the workflow, and that is done by loading the values into a database. So for example, we have a vendor field, a vendor phone number. We also have a department or requester of the person that's creating this actual submission of the solution. So when I start up the application, after I log into the system, FastFlow knows that I'm logged in as Ryan Brown. So FastFlow is able to look up to see that I'm in the IT organization and see what my permissions are to automatically populate some of those form fields. So I'm going to start by clicking on Start next to the Purchase Request workflow. And the very first thing that this workflow is designed to ask me for is to search for vendor information. So rather than me typing the vendor name, phone number, or any of their contact information into the form, I could do a quick search against my database and have that form automatically populated. So I'm just going to search on the letter A, and that's going to bring up all the vendors that meet that criteria with an A in their name. So I'll see Acme Distributing, Alliance Medical, etc. So what I'm going to do is click Select next to Acme Distributing, and that's going to pre-populate the form with Acme Distributing information. So you'll see on this next screen, when I previously showed you the blank form, this form is now pre-populated with Acme Distributing, along with their distributor ID number, their phone number. The form is being populated with my information since I'm logged into FastFlow, along with the date that I'm creating this purchase request and my department number. I'm just going to walk through this form real quick. Basically, all of these form fields are configurable by your organization. So for my purchase request, I'm going to choose a department number to build my request to. So I'm going to choose Department 1020. I'm going to choose an expense category of IT. And for justification, I'm going to make it very simple for this demo. I'm just going to say equipment needed for FormFast eSig application. Now down below the justification, you'll see that there are a couple signature fields. This form requires a signature from my director, and then it also requires a signature from the vice president if the total amount is over $10,000. If the total amount is over $25,000, it requires the CFO to sign off, and over $50,000, the CEO to sign off. And all of these routes and logic are defined in the Visual Workflow Designer, which I'll cover shortly, and show you guys how you could build your own logic to route forms to different individuals for approval. I'm just going to enter in a couple description items and part numbers along with the quantity and unit price to fill out my request. So I'm going to say Topaz SigPad, a couple devices to capture the electronic signature. We'll say quantity 25, and we'll say that they have a unit price of $300 each. I'm also going to fill out monitors in case we want to add a secondary display to some of the registration areas to capture the electronic signature. Quantity 25, and we'll say they cost $150 each. And finally, I'm going to add some USB extension cables as well, just for the SigPad devices in case I have to wrap the devices, route them through different holes in the desk, etc., just to make sure that they are long enough. And we'll say that we're only going to need 10 of those, and they're $12 each. So you'll see on the on the right-hand side of my screen, the prices are automatically calculated based on the unit price and the quantity. And if I scroll down, at the very bottom, it's going to create a total requisition amount. For this total requisition amount, you'll see that it is $11,370. So that is above the $10,000 mark. So when I submit this form, basically the routing that I have defined is first it's going to go to the director for the director's approval. Since it's over $10,000, it will then go to the vice president. But since it's less than $25,000, the CFO does not need to sign off, so the form will go directly from the vice president to the accounting and purchasing office that create the purchase order and create the actual purchase. I'm going to submit this form. Now, when I submitted the form, you'll see on my sent items that I have a purchasing request, description request for purchasing, and it was sent today at 11:47 a.m. Important thing to note is that I could see the present location. So at any point after I submit my request for purchasing, if I'm wondering where my equipment is that I'm trying to order, I could log into the FastFlow application and click on Send Items, and I'm able to track to see where my form is. So currently, the present location is at the department head, which means that the department head has to sign off on the form to move it along in the cycle. Now, the way FastFlow works, FastFlow can be configured to send email notifications as well. So, for example, for the department head, after I created this purchasing request that's requiring their signature, they will receive an email notification with a hyperlink directly into the FastFlow application to bring up that purchasing request. So they'll be able to log directly in and sign the approval for my purchase request and move the process along in the cycle. So what I'm going to show you next, I am going to log off as Ryan Brown, and I'm going to log back into the system as the department head to show you that the request is waiting in my inbox and how I could approve it or reject it if I need to. Once I log in as Joe Miller, who's configured as our director of our department, you'll see that in his inbox is a purchasing request. If I click on that purchasing request, this will use the new FormFast PDF viewer to be able to view the actual form, the request that I made, directly within our web application. So we are no longer dependent upon using Adobe Acrobat to view your PDF. If you scroll down, you'll be able to see the form that I filled out with the items that I need to order, along with their prices and quantity and the total purchase amount. Now, for example, I have a couple different options here. If something is wrong on the form, I could click this reject button, and what that will do is it will send a notification back to Ryan Brown saying the form was rejected, and I'll be able to type in a reason on why the form was rejected. So for example, maybe Ryan did not include the right price, or maybe Ryan needs to add some additional quantity, etc. I'm able to type in the reason, and that message will get transferred back to Ryan so that he can make the changes to start the process over again. If everything does look good on the form, I'm able to hit sign and send, and that will send it along in the process to the next person, which in this particular case would be the vice president because the total amount is over $10,000. Now let's say that Ryan forgot to fill out something on this form, such as the department director. What I can do is I can click on the actual form itself through the hyperlink, and that will bring up the same form that Ryan was working on. So as Joe, I'm able to view the form and make any changes if needed. Under Department Director, I could just type in my own name, Joe Miller, because Ryan forgot to populate that field. And all those fields and logic, we could pre-populate the information. So you could definitely pull the information out saying that Joe is Ryan's manager and automatically populate the information. But for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to fill it in manually today. After Joe makes that change, he could type in his information and he could click on Submit, and that will, continue to process the form. As I mentioned earlier, since the total amount is over $10,000, the notification will be sent to the vice president for approval. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to sign out of the system and just sign in real quick as Ryan again, just to show you the sent items, where I'll be able to see that the form has been approved by Joe and is now currently waiting at the vice president's desk for approval. Now to log in as the vice president, that will be the next stage. All right, I think let me log back in as Joe and transfer that form back to the vice president. Going to sign and send it, and that will send the form to the vice president. As the Vice President, Victor, when he logs into the system, and he will also receive an email notification if he wishes saying that there's a request for needing his signature, he'll be able to log in, and he'll also be able to see the form and also make any changes if needed. If Victor scrolls down on the form, he'll see the original form that Ryan submitted with the change that Joe submitted as well by adding the department director, and he will also see the director's signature that the form was electronically signed and approved by Joe Miller on June 17th at 11:52 a.m. So everything looks good on this form. I'm going to process the form now and send that over to the accounting office so that they can get it ready for purchasing. So finally, the last step in this particular workflow is just to log in as accounting. And what I'm going to do on the accounting side, once again, I'll see the notification in my inbox. I'll be able to click on the form and see the signature from both Joe and Victor. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in an estimated date of delivery and also a purchase order number. So for example, I could say, okay, I'm going to order this today. We're expecting it to come in on June 24th. Software is going to be ordered today on June 17th. And the PO number is 1234. I'll be able to finish populating the form and once again click on submit, and this will send it over to our purchasing office and also to image archiving as well. Now throughout this process, if Ryan was wondering where his order is, at any point he would be able to log in and see it moving along in the process from signature from Joe to Victor and then to Penny in our accounting office. Now the next thing I'm going to show everyone, I'm going to log into the system as the administrator. And I'm going to show you the Visual Workflow Designer, which is how we set up those routes, where we configured the routing to handle to go from Joe to Victor to accounting, and how we can make changes and add other criteria if needed. The new Visual Workflow Designer is very visual and very basic to use. It's all just based on drag and drop. So for example, in this particular workflow, we have the initiator set up to send the message to our department head, and that can be configured as a role or user or a department or location in the building. So for example, right now I have this particular workflow defined as a role to send it to the department head. I could also choose to actually send it to a particular user if I wanted to specify Joe rather than the department director, or I could send it to an entire department and anyone from that department would be able to log in and process the request. After Joe gets the request, the system is configured to send it to the Vice President, Victor, who then sends it to the CFO and then the CEO, depending on the criteria that we have defined. Now to see that criteria, if you click on the actual individual, this may be a little small, but you'll see the role step here. There's a role defined that if the total amount is over $9,999.99, so if we hit the $10,000 mark and above, that this person needs to configure and approve this individual workflow. We also have very similar routes set up for the CFO for the $25,000 mark and also for the CEO at the $50,000 mark. Now to configure these, I'm going to switch over to PowerPoint real quick just so that you'll be able to see it a little bit easier. So on the left-hand side is what I was just showing you in the Visual Workflow Designer. And then on the right-hand side, if we need to make any changes, I would be able to click on this, switch to Simple Rule Entry, and that's where I could define these individual fields. So for example, to set the total amount that requires signature over $10,000, I chose a text field option, and then I chose on my form surface the total box, and I could choose any of the form fields and set criteria based on any of the particular fields on my form surface. I then chose the condition that if the total amount is greater than, and then I set the value of $9,900.99 to trigger that particular role. So similar criteria was established for the CFO and also for the CEO. Where the CFO was defined with criteria of 25,000, and then the CEO was defined with criteria of 50,000. If the criteria is not met, it skips over that step. So that's why in our particular workflow, we noticed that it went right from Victor as the vice president directly to the financial administrator, Penny, because a signature was not required by the CFO or CEO based on the criteria that we set. Now, you'll also notice within the Visual Workflow Designer that there's a couple icons specified on each one of these fields. The pen icon right here notes that the form requires an approval from that particular person. So we could choose to require just an approval, or we could also choose to have an approval with a PIN required. So they'll log into the system, they'll be able to hit approve, but they'll also have to type in a PIN to make sure it's them that's signing and approving the form. We also have the option to add notes and attachments to each one of these fields. It's very easy to add each one of these options. You would just click on the icon, such as the attachment icon here, and drag it over to the particular individual. So I'm going to add an attachment to the initiator, and basically I'll be able to define what that attachment is. So let's say at my organization there's a requirement that I need to attach a PDF version of the product that I need to order. So some product information that may include the warranty, the product number, what the product being used for, anything like that that accounting may use or IT may need for purchasing purchases. So I drag the attachment icon over. I'm going to put in a title, and my title is just going to be additional information, additional product information. And then for the attachment description, I'm going to say, please include a PDF printout of the product description and warranty information. I could choose to make that information required or optional, so I'm going to check the required box to make sure that the initiator is always including a PDF printout of the product description and the warranty information for IT and accounting. Right now, for our department head, I require just a signature or basic approval from Joe. He's able to log in and click the approval button, and that's all that's needed. But in case Joe wants to add any notes, I'm going to add the notes section to Joe's approval process. So this will give him a notification that says, please ensure the initiator included warranty information. Under the vice president role, right now we're just requiring a basic signature. So I'm going to change that to require a PIN as well. So basically what I'll do is I'll click on the signature icon. I'm just going to drag it over here to the trash to remove it. And then I'm going to choose the options to drag a signature with PIN over to his role. During this process, you'll notice on the left-hand side that there is the option to allow users to add unlimited attachments. So in the event that they need to add additional attachments, by default, it is allowing them to add more attachments, but we could also uncheck that box. You know, FastFlow is not the area that you want to be including videos or any type of large files. It is a web-based application. But any type of PDF files or additional information on the task that you're trying to complete, you could definitely attach that and have that information be passed along to each approval process, and then finally at the end of the process when you're archiving the form into content management. Okay, Cliff, I'm going to hand it back to you. Is there anything else that you would like to cover in the Visual Workflow Designer?
No, I think I'll leave it here for a second. As Ryan was saying, you know, there are a lot of great options that he walked through, but hopefully it's a little bit more visually intuitive for users, as you saw, as he, you know, just dragging and dropping steps from the interface. But as you mouse over them, there's a description of each one of those steps, options, or step actions that is immediately apparent and useful information to the person building this. you know, our goal here is to make this a little bit more simple and intuitive for users to maintain and build out their workflows. The idea is to have this as an extensible solution that can be used in a lot of different areas. There was a question to talk a little bit about the form design, so I'll mention that as well as we talk about that. For those of you who are not familiar with FastFlow, the tool uses the exact same form design tool as the rest of our application set, and that is using Form Designer. And I don't know, Ryan, if you have Form Designer open.
I do. I can open that
purchase. Perfect. Yeah, open that purchase request. And as he's opening that, really the form design, for those of you familiar with how that works in for fast print and web form imprint, it's very similar, except that now there are fillable fields that you see on the screen in yellow. For those of you who are familiar with this, you may have that turned off if you're just designing a form for web form imprint or fast print. But here I can see where those fillable fields would reside in the application, and we can name those. I can go into a field and name that, have an object definition that says the total amount or a total, and that then maps to the application that we saw before. We can populate that information into a database or take information from an external database and populate it onto the form, just as Ryan showed in the beginning of that process. If we go out and look by a vendor number or a vendor ID, all of that then goes into the form or can be pulled out as discrete data from the form itself. But the nice thing about this tool is it does use the same form designer that some of our existing customers already have expertise with. There's a little bit of a different set of functionality that you would use for Form Designer. But now, as Ryan's showing in the application in FastFlow, we can take user information that we're capturing based on the user logging in through Windows or manually in the application, and we can automatically populate the current date, the department, the initiation timestamp, and we can auto-sequence a number on there on the form that will potentially be a unique identifier. If someone needs to go back and look up that purchase request later, they can have a unique ID that the application is creating automatically for them. Or we can tie into an external database that you see here that might be a vendor lookup table. We can search and have a search key on the right to determine whether it's we can go out and query for that information. So all of this now, we also have a viewer. I won't get Ryan to go into that piece, but we can actually visually map that from a database onto the form itself and pick the fields where we want. But all of this is just hopefully showing you some of the power of the application, and for those of you familiar with FastFlow, some of the new look and feel and how it becomes a little bit more intuitive. And our development team, as Tom said, has really worked extensively over the past few months to get 6.0 ready, but they're not done. They continue to work and improve and take feedback from our customers and filter it back into the product. So we hope, in the near future to share some more exciting updates with you as we go through here. So with that, I guess we'll open it for some questions and see if there are any questions that have come in through Q&A or if there are other folks who want to submit them at this point before turning back over to Aaron and Tom.
So thanks, Cliff. Like Cliff said, we're going to open for questions at this point. And as we do that, I do want to note that we're focusing on the purchase request process here to help illustrate what the FastFlow platform can do. But obviously there's a lot of different processes that we can automate with this product, and we want to get some of your feedback about what processes you'd like to automate. So I'm going to open up a poll here within the WebEx interface, and hopefully this will work correctly. I believe if it works right, you should see a poll at the top of the screen there that you can provide some feedback about what processes that you'd like to see automated with this tool. So give us some feedback there. And going to the questions, one question that came in was, can you set a step to go to 2 people at once, or can only be 1 person at a time?
That's a good question. Yeah, you can certainly, Ryan showed this a little bit, but you can actually set up a single step to go to an individual or a group or an entire department. But beyond that, if we send it to a group, we can really have 2 different functions that we provide through that group. So Ryan's dragging this on here, and we can say, and maybe we have a contract review team or something like that that's going to look at this process. This isn't the best for this example, but there's also an option here to put a group approval amount on there. If you don't put a group approval number on the form, then it will go into a group of 1 or more recipients, and any one of them can complete the form and send it on to the next step in the process. So it might be if we're doing an IT access request form and there are 2 folks in IT who handle setup for network or email, that might go into an inbox that's Ryan and Cliff, and if Cliff is out doing something else or is working on another task, Ryan opens that up, completes it, and it sends it on and removes it from both of our inboxes. But if we're on a committee and there are 7 or 10 folks on that committee who need to approve it, we may set a threshold of 75% or 66%, that if we go over that threshold, once we reach two-thirds of that group, then it will move on to the next step of the process. Otherwise, it's in everybody's inbox, and everybody has visibility into that process. That's a very good question. Thank you.
Okay, I should also note that in order to submit questions, you can do that while we're in the shared screen mode by clicking in the chat at the top of the screen and submitting questions that way. We do have a few questions coming in via the chat. The next one I'd like to submit is, how does FormFast handle multiple hierarchies, e.g. more than 1 VP in the organization? How would you define which route to follow?
So there are a couple of things that we can do here. One is, this can be complex to set up and maintain, but we can have an internal hierarchy that is built for a department or the organization that knows that, who everybody reports up to. So in the user configuration, there is a departmental hierarchy where we can say, Cliff reports up to Pat and beyond, and that can be set in the application to automatically distribute that to that person's supervisor or their department head. Another option to handle that kind of workflow, Ryan's showing you the hierarchy here that can be built in the application. You can also have content on the form that helps determine where that needs to go. So we can either select from a drop-down list or pre-populate from a database that then the form can tell us where that's going to be passed. So as Ryan's showing here, we can say if the department, I'm trying to think, the department supervisor or some name is pre-filled from a database, if that can be mapped to a user table, then we can automatically distribute that. And you see here we can map that to a table, either a custom setting that we put in there to link to a user ID or a user name. All of that information could be linked to automatically distribute that. Good question there.
Yeah, just to jump in, one other thing you could do is you could set up a like you mentioned earlier, a user group where there was, let's say, the set of VPs, maybe there's 3 VPs that are available to approve this, and have it set up so that if any one of them approves it, then it continues. You could do it that way as well.
That's a good point. And there's also an option, Tom reminded me of this in his comment. There's the ability as well to prompt the user to send within a group. So if we need to send it to a physician as an example, but we don't know which one to send to automatically in the software, we can have groups that we can restrict the user to selecting from. So maybe we say, for this, we need to send it to somebody in IT, but the person who's sending it is going to know which person to send it to, and then we can prompt them to select, a physician in this example. So then they'll be prompted for a group, and they can select from a drop-down where that needs to be sent next. As we're in this interface, I saw another question come in about reviewing step actions in a little bit more detail. So I'll just quickly touch on a couple of those. Maybe Ryan can mouse over those in the bottom left-hand portion of the window. So a lot of these step actions are things that we built in our demo environment, but they can be customized. So we might have archiving of specific forms. We can send those to an external database. We may take content out of the form. So here we have case management. Can be maybe the case management forms are going to a different repository than clinical forms or administrative forms. So those step actions can be set to either trigger at a specific point in the process or at the end. Once a form is complete, that's typically where we'll do a disposition or final step action where we'll send that form as a TIFF image into a repository. But we can also trigger emails at certain steps. As Ryan was saying earlier, we may automatically generate an email to a user that just sends a hyperlink to get into that form. That can be turned on and off for users if they're, if say, the CFO is in here rarely and wants to get those notifications, we may turn those on for that user. But if somebody in IT is accessing it daily or even a few times a day, you might want to turn that off. But you can also customize the email content, as you were saying, that could be custom HTML that says once we complete this step, rather than sending the entire form itself, we may want to just trigger a notification to somebody involved or even outside the organization to let them know. Maybe we're ordering some supplies and there's a third-party vendor who handles that, the ordering for us. Maybe they're not inside the intranet, and we can trigger at that point in the process to take some specific content of that form and send it to them. So we can restrict that so they're not getting the entire form and potentially some sensitive data that we don't want to share the entire content with them. Aaron, any other, I see a few on here I can go through, or you can tell me which ones you want me to do next.
Sure. There's a couple questions about the iPad. Try to put those two together. And I think you touched on it, but the iPad, doing workflow on the iPad is available with this product, correct? And the other question is kind of a follow-up to that. So you're using PDF for printout. How does that affect iPad usage?
Yeah, I did see that question, and hopefully this wasn't confusing. Ryan was showing the PDF previously to show you sort of what the form would look like even outside of our application. But the PDF viewer that we used in the prior application, the 5X version of our software, was it required Adobe Reader. So every single user that logged in, still, even though it was a standard application, it required them to essentially run through a PC or a PC-like device. Whereas now, on an iPad in the 6.0 version, we can interact with the forms because we are not using the Adobe Reader. We're building in our own PDF viewer, so we can interact with that on an iPad just like we would on a normal device. And I say just like we would, there are some differences in the interface. It's all through a browser. You can use Safari as, I believe, as Tom was saying, we're expanding our footprint for the types of browsers we can use beyond just Internet Explorer. But now I can interact with that on the keyboard. That will pop up on the screen, and I can scroll with the finger, or he's scrolling with his finger, and he can touch into the fields and fill them out. So it's still a robust interface. We can submit the form just like we could on a PC device. So hopefully that answers the PDF and the iPad question.
Yeah, let me just jump in there for a second. Somebody was asking about responsive design, and so that's kind of a technical question. But I just want to, and so I don't want to go too technical into it, but basically the interface has been designed to be more touch-friendly, but it is not specifically a responsive design the way that developers talk about responsive design. However, it is intended to be very usable on an iPad or other tablet-type device. Not necessarily designed to be used on a phone-sized form factor. So I think that's an important distinction to make. It's something that we're considering, but we haven't had as much call for that as the ability to use it on a tablet-sized device.
Yeah, that's an important point. That still these are some of the power of FastFlow, that we can take traditional form entry, something that's very similar to your look and feel, but that then means we are presenting it really as a what would normally be an 8.5 by 11 size type of document, either portrait or landscape, and that doesn't necessarily scale well to an iPhone, or it might work well on an iPad or even a Nexus 7, but definitely size and form factor would matter in this.
And we're looking at, on Ryan's screen, at FastFlow being used with an iPad right now, correct?
Yes, he's actually using his iPad and mirroring that through an application to show on the screen. So he's using an iPad, and I believe you're just using your finger to scroll through that and interact with it.
Yes. Sorry, yes, that's correct, Cliff. I'm just using my finger to scroll through my iPad.
Obviously, we can't see him move it around, but as he can kind of move the form and pinch and zoom and all the things that you'd normally do on an iPad. You see how the keyboard pops up as well, so I can interact with it by typing in a vendor ID number or name. Other questions?
I have another question about drop-downs, and you might have touched on this as well, but just to clarify. So we are able to implement a specific set of drop-downs in the form instead of having to enter information and descriptions, correct?
So there are, this gets into an area that has a couple of different points to it. maybe defer to Tom to the product roadmap for this as a second part of the question. But there are today there are drop downs in the form that are built in Form Designer. Those, if we right-click on the form and go into the object definition and Form Designer, we can have a pre-filled list that is really, this is a text file in Windows that that our form design application is calling to. And this can be populated by by taking information out of a database, but it does require us taking that content, mapping it onto the form or associating it with the form through a somewhat manual process that you see here, although I can build that as a delimited file that Form Designer can interact with. But we are considering for a future release interacting with that from a database. I don't believe that's a 6.0 feature. Is that correct, Tom?
No, that's correct. So the fact that we have moved away from Adobe Reader as the method of displaying our forms in the interface means that we can do this in the future. While we were using Adobe Reader, we didn't have the ability to do that. We have not entered that feature yet, but we do foresee it as one of the things we want to do in the future. So I don't want to comment on future releases that haven't been exactly nailed to the wall yet, but it's certainly something that we're considering.
Yeah, it is in our general roadmap. It just hasn't. We don't have exact information about that, but we can. So the two methods of entering that data now are through a somewhat static, predefined drop-down list, or by querying an external database in the application, as you saw there, what Ryan was showing in FastFlow. We can go in and tie into that, like a Meditech example, to their DR SQL database and populate that information. So one other point I might make to some of the IT folks is that, obviously with something like a large database like Meditech's DR or some other enterprise database, the IT access to that, we may not want to provide access to everything through the FormFast application. We may want to have tables or views into that that we can connect to and have a subset of that. But absolutely, we can connect to that to pre-fill the form data when we submit it. I saw a question, a follow-up question about Active Directory. So FastFlow does allow us to bring in a lot of information from, we can map exactly what we're bringing in from Active Directory, and it can contain some of that hierarchy. Although I believe most of our customers don't have that kind of detail built in Active Directory, but this may be something we need to investigate specifically for a customer scenario to see how that's structured in Active Directory. For those of you not familiar with that term, it's essentially the way a lot of hospitals will set up the users and how they are accessing applications and Windows through their environment, authenticating on the hospital's network. So that we can tie in to that login process or protocol through FastFlow, so the users aren't manually logging into the application. They can do that basically by passing what they've already logged into Windows into FastFlow.
Okay, well, it looks like we are a little bit over time. I know there's a few other questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, but we'll reach out and answer those offline. But as you can see, there's a lot that we can do with FastFlow. Just looking at the poll results, you have a lot of great ideas about how you'd like to see it used for invoices, purchase requests, employee vacation requests, new hire requisitions, material services, food service orders, a long list here of different ways that you see using this platform, and we're excited about it and finding new ways to automate your processes. With that being said, I'd like to thank Tom Holt and Cliff Babbitt and Ryan Brown for taking the time and sharing FastFlow and as well as the other new features in 6.0. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And at this point, we're going to proceed. One thing I should mention is if you'd like to find out more information about this product or any product, you can reach out to us at formfast.com/contact. And while you're there, make sure to sign up for the FormFast newsletter. You can easily do that at formfast.com/contact by just clicking on that envelope icon, and it allows you to sign up. Only takes a couple of seconds, so make sure you do that to stay informed about all the new product updates that are coming out, as well as other FormFast events. I should also note that we spend most of the time talking about FastFlow 6, since that's there's a lot of great new features there. We'll also be talking about e-signature tomorrow. Cliff will be back to share some more information about e-signature first thing at 11 o'clock Central Time. And also here in a bit, you'll get a chance to speak with some other FormFast specialists as they discuss how we integrate with your EMR and add value. So if you have questions about products we didn't cover today, make sure to ask them about that. And finally, once again, as a reminder, tomorrow there's going to be a tips and tricks and training session that goes into more detail about other products you might be familiar with. So now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to move on to the next part of the presentation. And I'm actually going to, for sake of time, move Kim Schrader and her customer service update to tomorrow's session. I definitely want her to share some of the information about her team and how they're supporting you with